Peace and welcome to you. Welcome to Christ Church Cathedral. My name is Timothy Kimbrough, and I'm the dean, the senior pastor here, and just want to say a couple of words about why we're meeting here. I know what was originally scheduled to be at the steps of the courthouse. Weather forecast looked like we might be pushed off that. Got a phone call 2 days ago. This is the congregation, the spiritual home that Abu most recently has affiliated with. And a word about that might be helpful as we sort of enter into the latest about his life and this gathering specifically to advocate on his behalf. In this particular tradition, it is not often personal witness that is compelling. In this tradition is often corporate worship or music or song. But in Abu's case, it was people who surrounded him. Ed Miller is a name you might hear come up from time to time, or Joe Engel, another name that you might come up. Two folk who worship here over time, who had worked with Abu over many years. And a point came, I think it's 4 or 5 years ago, very close around the time of his birthday, when he, through the witness of those who had gathered around him, came to believe he wanted to be a part of that community, of that congregation, where those who seemed to be loving on him and caring for him, advocating for him, where they had affiliated, where their home was. So they called the pastor, and "Pastor, would you come?" And after we spoke for several weeks, the bishop was brought in, and again, in this particular tradition, the way one becomes a part of a congregation is to make a profession of faith. A bishop prays for you, puts hands on your head, and it's done. And from that time on, we've continued to pray for him in our life here, and folk from this community, along with many, many others from outside the community, have cared for him. But that day was his birthday, October the 15th. We gathered out at River Bend. Arrangements were made for that service of confirmation to take place there. For me, it was a very moving time to see so many voices from so many different walks of life gathered in prayer to lift him up, to advocate on his behalf, and to receive him into this community. So we're here in part because the weather suggested it was going to rain, and in part because the next best place might be that place that where he's hung his hat for the time being to make this community his home. Grateful to welcome you, and I look forward to the word on Abu's behalf that will be spoken here.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Really appreciate you giving us this lovely, lovely space to be in this morning. My name is Kelly Henry, and I am a member of Abu-Ali Abdur'Rahman's legal team, and I would like to thank you and welcome you all here this morning as well to hear some more about this exceptional, important, and even very unusual case of injustice, racism, and deceit. The way we're going to handle things this morning is that first you're going to hear from Professor Phyllis Hildreth, who has come to be a colleague of Abu-Ali's, and she will describe her work journey through working out at Riverbend Maximum Security Institution with Abu. Next, I will discuss how we got to where we are and the state of the current litigation in this case, and why this is a case about racism and why this is a case that threatens to destabilize justice in our state. And then finally, Abu-Ali's longtime friend and attorney, counselor, advocate, Brad McLean, will discuss for you a more holistic view of his case and his personal relationship with Abu, which is itself quite extraordinary. So with that, I would like to introduce Professor Hildreth to you. For those of you who do not know Professor Hildreth, I will read all of her many accomplishments because they are quite impressive. She is the Vice President for Strategy and Institutional Advancement at American Baptist College. She is Associate Professor at Lipscomb University, College of Leadership and Public Service. She was Chief Counsel for Administration at the Maryland State Office of the Public Defender Deputy Secretary for Maryland Department of Juvenile Justice, first Managing Director for the Baltimore Juvenile Justice Center. She received her BA in biology from Harvard University, her Juris Doctor degree from the University of Maryland, and her master's in conflict management from Lipscomb University. She was also adjunct faculty member at the University of Baltimore School of Law, and she is the founder of Falcon Fund, which calls for civic engagement in justice, service, and health. Please welcome Professor Phyllis Hildreth.
Thank you. Good morning. Yes, I am Phyllis Hildreth, and today I come before you as a conflict management educator to speak on behalf of my colleague and friend, Mr. Abu-Ali Abdur'Rahman. The work that we have engaged together on Unit 2 at the Riverbend Maximum Security Institution has been nothing short of miraculous, and so with all due respect, I believe that it is absolutely appropriate and possibly ordained that we are in this hallowed space to have this critical conversation. I first met Mr. Abdur'Rahman in 2015 when the Reverend Janet Wolfe invited me to join the volunteer faculty for the School of Alternative Learning and Transformation at Riverbend Maximum Security Institution on Unit 2, which houses death row inmates. Reverend Wolfe asked me to help teach a class on community building and peaceful transformation. Mr. Abdur'Rahman impressed me with his clearly articulated passion for learning, one, solid and evidence-based conflict management skills, grounded in academic rigor, and ways to practice these skills in his community being Unit 2, inside of this correctional facility. His concern that he and his colleagues acquire the skills that would give them the professional competence to do the work of managing both interpersonal and intra-organizational conflict was profound and compelling. Mr. Abdur'Rahman has served as an inspiration, architect, and implementation leader in designing, developing, and co-teaching a dispute resolution and peace-building curriculum that builds trust, safety, and mutual respect, and hope among and between residents of the facility, correctional officers, and the administration of the prison. Mr. Abdur'Rahman has worked with me in developing the curriculum for this conflict resolution course. The curriculum is based on the curricula I use in the college and graduate school courses that I teach in conflict resolution, adapted to the prison setting. It also incorporates the requirements established by the Tennessee Supreme Court to become a listed mediator in Tennessee under Rule 31. The curriculum trains our students to help fellow inmates and correctional officers to deal with the most serious and prevalent problems in the prison, including racial conflicts, conflicts between officers and inmates, suicide, prison sexual abuse, and rape. Not only has Mr. Abdur'Rahman helped develop our program by adapting it to the prison environment to address the problems that often arise in prison, but he has also developed the protocols for addressing conflict situations, protocols that are now being used by fellow inmates as well as correctional officers. And this includes something that may not be clear to us on the outside, but some of those internal rules are meant to control and constrain the population in ways that the controls outgrow the initial need. And so it's important for you to understand that one of those, the labeling of inmates as incompatible, when A and B fuss and fight, they receive an official designation of incompatible. And that means that those two individuals can no longer be together in recreational spaces, in educational spaces, in worship spaces. The work that we are talking about here that Mr. Abdur'Rahman has led has actually created for the first time an institutional way for those incompatibilities to be adjudicated and lifted, restoring and reconciling not only the two individuals, but the way in which they can operate in their community. And you need to understand that not only does that make the community safer, but it makes it more efficient for everybody. And this is the kind of deep thinking and deep work that he is bringing to his community by his current calling. The program works. It transformed the student who go through the training, helping them to better understand themselves, the sources of conflict, and the methods for managing and resolving the conflicts. This program has been a major factor in maintaining peace and harmony on Unit 2. The program helps prison administrators, staff, and inmates. And this program helps families beyond the prisons. As participants in the program, talk with your families and assist them not only to break generational cycles of dysfunction and despair, but also to reverse those cycles by teaching and spreading the knowledge that they have gained inside of this course. My earlier work, I worked in juvenile family justice in Baltimore. I saw families broken apart by the crack epidemic. We know that we had parents who were continuing to parent on the inside while broken families on the outside, were trying to cohere together. Our students, our colleagues in Unit 2, are actually spreading this knowledge to their families. When the families come in for visitation, by phone calls back home, they are mediating family disputes. They are spreading the knowledge and spreading the health. This is the only way we break the chain in these systems that have destroyed us. And this is the work. It starts here. In closing, I would like to say that I consider Mr. Abdur'Rahman as a colleague and a fellow teacher. He is constantly teaching me. With his wisdom, education, and experience, he mentors younger inmates and helps them deal more effectively with the pressures of prison life. Without his presence and passionate involvement in what we are doing, the prison would be a different, less peaceful place. If we are to lose Mr. Abdur'Rahman, it would be a tragic loss for each and every one of us. His institutional knowledge, training in conflict resolution, and spirituality are invaluable to the prison and his fellow inmates and correctional officers. Losing him would be an unfathomable loss to me. More importantly, it would be an unbearable loss to this community. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Holden. When we learned that District Attorney General Glenn Funk had reviewed the evidence in this case and determined that the just result was to amend the judgment so that Abu would be taken off of death row in Unit 2, one of the things that we talked with him about was his plan to take this Rule 31 mediation training that he has received from Professor Hildreth and others and grow that within the prison. He would have been moved to Unit 6, and he was looking forward to spreading the knowledge to another unit, to a group of inmates, many of whom will go back into the community. If Mr. Abdur'Rahman's amended judgment is not upheld, he will be denied that opportunity, and those individuals will be denied that knowledge. And we thank Professor Hildreth for her presence here today to share with you the importance of that program. And you all need to realize this is training that lawyers are required to go through. It's Tennessee Supreme Court Rule 31 mediation training. I'm not a qualified mediator. I would have to go through Professor Hildreth's course if I wanted to be a mediator. This is the sort of high-level training that Mr. Abdur'Rahman has brought to Unit 2 and the leader in that field. But now I would like to as I often do, be the boring lawyer and talk to you a little bit about where we are, because it is confusing. On August the 30th of this year, we all believed that this case was over with, that the judgment had been amended. Under the rules, no judgment is final until 30 days have passed. That's why many of you reported that the Tennessee Department of Correction told you that Mr. Abdur'Rahman would not be moved from Unit 2 for 30 days. The state of Tennessee waited 3 weeks and filed what we believe to be an improper notice of appeal, but until that is determined by the courts, he remains in Unit 2. And so I want to talk with you today about what is at stake here in this appeal. Mr. Abdur'Rahman's case involves ineffective assistance of counsel, prosecutorial misconduct, mental illness, and of course, issues of race. These are issues that are familiar to all of you who have covered the death penalty in Tennessee. But there are aspects of this case that are so extraordinary, unique, and unusual to Mr. Abdur'Rahman that I think it's important to break it down in the most simple of terms. Because you see, when the appointed Attorney General is appealing this decision, he is not representing the state of Tennessee. The state of Tennessee has been spoken for by the duly elected District Attorney General, who was given the authority by the Constitution and the statutes of Tennessee to do justice in this case. No, instead, the appointed Attorney General is defending the rogue prosecutor's racism and deceit. That's what he's standing up for. And you won't see anything in his papers that say anything different. Because if you look at the record, if you look at the documents, and we have some of them here for you today, there is no question that the District Attorney General, the rogue District Attorney General, used insidious racial stereotyping to remove African American jurors from Abu-Ali's trial. And we need look no further. He removed 3, but we can just look at Juror Thomas. We can look at Juror Thomas and we can see what this rogue District Attorney General said about this college-educated pastor on the record. He called him inarticulate, a slow learner, uncommunicative. These are old, tired, rejected racist tropes. But that's what he said in the 80s, and that was what was accepted as a justification for denying Juror Thomas his right under the Constitution to serve as a juror. And why is that important? Why is it important? Who cares that we just removed these jurors, right? He had a jury of 12. Well, it's important because the Constitution says that we're all, every citizen accused, is entitled to a jury of his or her peers, right? That's what we're entitled to. And why are we entitled to that? Because it's the only way in our form of government that the people serve as a check on the government. The people, the citizens, you and me, we get to sit in that courtroom and we get to hear, because the founding fathers were skeptical of the powers of an authoritarian government. Maybe a government that's appointed that can come in and wrest power and control out of the elected officials, right? That's what happened. So Mr. Abdur'Rahman and Mr. Thomas were denied their rights. And it's important because our justice system is based on the idea of this jury of our peers. And the problem that we've had with this case, and we've heard as we hear time and again in every death penalty case, you've heard it over and over. This case has been through all these appeals. People have heard these claims. No, this case has been broken apart, bit by bit, using procedural technicality after procedural technicality to prevent any court from having an opportunity to view the case holistically until it got to Judge Monty Watkins' courtroom with Glenn Funk taking 3 years. This didn't just happen overnight. 3 years to review the evidence in this case to determine that there was an injustice here. And what happened is that we finally got the proof. We know the words are tired racial tropes, but now we have the proof that the United States Supreme Court finally made relevant and admissible in a case called Foster versus Chatham, and then reaffirmed this last term in Flowers versus Mississippi. And what the Supreme Court said is that, yes, you can look at prosecutors' notes. We couldn't do that before. We couldn't look at the prosecutor's notes. We couldn't use the fact that he wrote down negative, stereotypical things about this juror. But more importantly, we have this prosecutor's own words. He was at a training in 2015 where he was training young prosecutors, not in 1987, prosecutors in 2015 in the 21st century, telling them how to pick jurors. And you know what he said? Use race. He said, I wouldn't have any black juror on a case if I had a Mexican defendant, because everybody knows all blacks hate Mexicans. He talked about the Belle Meade type juror and how they wouldn't care about what happens in East Nashville. He said that in 2015 in front of a group of young, impressionable prosecutors. But there were prosecutors there who were offended, and they wrote a letter complaining about this unethical conduct. And we came into possession of that letter. And that letter proves what we knew to be true, which is that this DA used race to strike this juror. And now we finally had that opportunity to get into court and bring some justice to Abu-Ali. And that's exactly what happened. You know, what happened here with the district attorney who was elected by the people of Davidson County and the criminal court judge who's elected by the people of Davidson County is they did their job. Prosecutors have a duty to do justice, not win at all costs. They did their job here. They looked at the proof and they said there's an injustice, and guess what? The judicial system gets to correct injustices, right? Isn't that what they're supposed to be there for? And that's what they did. They did that here. And now, what we have that is extraordinary, that is unusual, that doesn't happen all the time, is we have this appointed AG coming in saying, I want to take your power away. I want to disenfranchise the voters of Davidson County who have these elected officials doing what they want them to do. Folks, look at Davidson County. There's not a single person on death row from Davidson County who was put there in the 21st century. The people of Davidson County support what happened here. And I believe the people of the state of Tennessee support what happened here. But we have this man who's not accountable to anyone, who comes in this bold power grab and says, no, you can't do justice. No, we're going to execute this man even though we know that his death sentence is based on racism and deceit. And they're going to have to own that, and they're going to have to be responsible for that. And if that happens, this is a threat beyond just this case. Because the legal system is based on the idea that lawyers are able to count on the word of their opposing counsel, that we are able to say, yes, we can count on that agreement. That's how we settle cases. That's how the justice system moves forward. If we can't count on the word of our opposing counsel because somebody else can come in and take that away from us, then we can't settle cases anymore. And the system comes to a grinding halt. See, the way precedent works, folks, is you get a little crack in the door. You tell the court, oh, it's just this case. It's just this one case. It's just this one little problem. And then once you get that crack in the door, you bust it wide open. So what next? What next? What if a district attorney general decides, I don't want to seek the death penalty in this case? Is the state attorney general going to come in and intervene and file an interlocutory appeal and say that they're going to overrule his decision? What if a prosecutor decides that the right thing to do is to plead a case down? What if he says, I'm not going to seek death? Maybe he says, I'm going to give somebody life imprisonment without parole. If the attorney general doesn't like it, does he get to come in and overrule that decision? That is destabilizing, folks. And worst of all, what's happening here undermines the integrity of our system. It dismantles justice. And the people can't have trust in a system that says we don't have the power to right ourselves. What Judge Watkins did and what District Attorney General Funk did is justice. Are we really saying that the justice system has the power to do justice? thank you for listening to my comments now. We definitely have some handouts for you, and I'll come back at the close to take any of your questions. But now I'd like to introduce Mr. Brad McLean, who was once upon a time a really respectable lawyer with the law firm of Stites and Harbison, and got sucked into this work by a legal lion, Bill Reddick. And he and Brad represented Abu-Ali for a number of years, and he has remained steadfast and by Abu's side even into his retirement. So please welcome Brad.
Thank you. I'm going to be a little extemporaneous here. I've been asked to talk about Abu-Ali, the person, and then I want to conclude with some remarks about where we are, in legally speaking. I started representing Abu-Ali in 1996, early 1996. And so I've been representing him continuously for, how many years is that? 23 years, almost 24 years. And one of the things that people don't understand, and particularly a lot of defense lawyers don't understand, is that when you represent a capital defendant, a person who is facing a death sentence, one of the most important things you must do is to learn about him and get to know him and to build his trust in you. You have to know his life intimately, because in a death penalty trial, there are really two trials going on. The first trial is about what happened and whether a crime was committed. The second trial is about his life, and that's what is at stake. Now, a crime takes only perhaps an hour or a few minutes, or maybe a couple of days. A life takes an entire life, and it starts from before birth. And that's what we have to learn about, because we are defending his life, literally. So I have, over the last 23 years, I have spent more time with Abu-Ali, and I've gotten to know him more intimately and all about his background more thoroughly than anyone else in my life outside of my immediate family. And I call him brother, because that's the way I feel about him. Now, I want to talk about his spirituality. And by the way, welcome to his church. This is his church. He's never been inside this building. And I've taken some pictures this morning so I can take those pictures out to him, so he can see what the building looks like. But he is a part of this church. And I want to talk about his spirituality. I remember when he was about to be confirmed into the Episcopal Church, he asked, well, do I have to change my name, Abu-Ali Abdur'Rahman? And he said, no, not at all. And so he didn't want to change that name. His spiritual roots run deep. He has borrowed from every religious tradition that he has come in contact with. Native American spirituality. He was living in the Dakotas. When he lived in Chicago, his fiancée was a Quaker, and she used to take him out to Cabrini Green, the largest residential project in Chicago, to work with the young people there. And she would say, when he would sing, it was spellbinding, and it is. He only sings spiritual songs. And then when he was in prison, he became a Muslim, and he practiced Islam strictly. He would get up every morning and he would pray, and then he would pray 4 or 5 times a day. And he followed all of the disciplines, the spiritual disciplines of Islam. And then when Ed Miller particularly started visiting him, a member of this church who's here today, he became very interested in Ed's religious tradition, and he became attracted to that. My son is a geologist, and he talks about what's called a braided stream. I don't know if you know what a braided stream is, but there's some beautiful braided stream systems in different parts of the world. And if you go on the internet, you can get some pictures of them. And what a braided stream is a lot of little streams that just weave in and out of each other. And that's the way Abu-Ali views religion. That's the way he views his spiritual life. A lot of different streams that are braided in and out, but all of those streams, when you look at a satellite picture of a braided stream, you see that they're all flowing in the same direction. And they all end up in the same place, in the deep sea. And that's sort of an analogy for God. They're all headed towards the same God. That's the way he looks at it. So while he's a member of this church, he has not abandoned Islam. He has not abandoned Native American spirituality. I remember it began early in his life because he was so horribly abused as a child, he would run away into the forest. And he would commune with the animals in the forest. And I remember when we had a 2-week trial in federal court back in 1998, his wife at the time testified, and she said it was amazing to see how Abu-Ali was around animals. They would come to him, wild animals, and he just had a way of communicating with them. And that's really the source of his spirituality. And now in the prison, there was, a couple of years ago, a bird that was caught inside one of the cages of the prison. And no one else knew how to rescue that bird. And they asked Abu-Ali, and he was able to calm the bird down. The bird got into his hand, and he was able to release that bird outside of the prison, outside of the cage. That's the essence of Abu-Ali's spirituality. As part of his spiritual life, he has tried desperately to make connection. And I think this also was an outgrowth of his abused childhood. He has always sought family. He has always sought community. And you heard Professor Hildreth talk about building the community within the prison. That's what he's always been about. And he's always sought connection with a higher power. Aside from his spirituality and his drive for connection and community, he is also an intensely loyal person. When he trusts you, when he trusts whatever group he feels like he's a part of, he is fiercely loyal. He is loyal to me. His loyalty to the group that he joined when he came to Nashville, a religious type group, was fierce, and that's what got him into trouble. And that's what landed him on death row. But he is fiercely loyal because he wants that attachment. He wants that connection. Another characteristic of Abu-Ali's life, however, is betrayal. Betrayal is a common theme throughout his life. He was betrayed by his family when he was growing up. He was betrayed by the prison system when he went into prison, and he was horribly abused. He was a target in prison. Unimaginable trauma for years. He was betrayed by the group that he joined here in Nashville. I think that's what hurts him the most. He was betrayed by them. And he got in trouble because of them. And then they abandoned him. And from my perspective, probably the worst betrayal, those are all horrible, but the worst betrayal is the betrayal of his defense lawyer at trial. He betrayed him because he didn't investigate the case. He didn't put up a defense at all. Every court that has looked at this case agrees with that. No one disputes that. He was betrayed by his defense lawyer. He was betrayed by the prosecutor, who engaged in a pattern of egregious misconduct and deception and lies and racism. And he was betrayed by the court system. Let me, one of the handouts here is a series of quotes from different judges about this case. Let me read you some of those quotes. This is from Federal District Court Judge Todd Campbell, who heard our habeas case and conducted the 2-week trial. And as a result of that, he vacated the death sentence. It was reversed on appeal, but he vacated the death sentence. The overwhelming nature of the evidence presented to this court, a significant portion of which was not presented to the jury or the state courts because of the betrayal of its defense lawyer, and the almost complete failure to present a defense at petitioner's sentencing hearing, almost complete failure, compels this court's conclusion that petitioner's, Abu-Ali's, death sentence cannot stand. And then from Tennessee Supreme Court Justice Birch, the criminal courthouse downtown is named after him. It seems strikingly unfair, in my view, that we should allow such an extreme and final punishment to be imposed upon a man whose only chance to defend himself before a jury was snatched away by ineffective assistant counsel. And then, in my view, it is plainly unconscionable in a death penalty case to ponder our errors, declare that our hands are tied, and yet send Abdur'Rahman to be executed. Our duty clearly calls for us to relentlessly pursue a just result. The chief judge for the United States Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit, which is one of the highest ranking judicial offices in the country, just below the Supreme Court, he had a number of things to say. The prosecutor, listen to this, the prosecutor desecrated his noble role. He failed grossly in his duty to act as the representative of a sovereignty whose interest in the criminal prosecution is not that it shall win a case, but that justice shall be done. Abdur'Rahman may face the ultimate penalty as a result. Justice will bear a scar. And then he also pointed out, and nobody disputes this, no court has ever considered the constitutional fairness of Mr. Abdur'Rahman's trial based upon a cumulative consideration of all of the evidence and all of the indisputable constitutional error that occurred in this case. No one looked at whether this was a fair trial. It was really interesting the way I learned about the AG's appeal. The way I learned about the appeal that the AG filed was I got a call from a reporter. And she called me up and she said, I saw that the AG is appealing the agreed order that converted his death sentence to a life sentence. Do you have a comment? I said, I don't know anything about it. I put down the phone, I looked, I called some folks, said, have you heard anything? No, no one heard anything. Then I called the reporter right back. I said, how did you find out about it? And she said, well, we got a press release from the AG's office. Could you please send it to me? And she did. She sent me both the press release and the notice of appeal filed by the AG. It's never happened to me before. I don't know if it's happened to anybody before. And that was remarkable. So, a few days later, I was just so baffled, astounded by what had happened. And I wrote this out, and I want to read it to you. I am not here to comment on the papers the AG has filed in this case. However, the AG has taken the extraordinary step of issuing numerous statements to the press to forward his messaging about this case. And so we feel the need to respond to what the AG is saying to the press. The AG claims he is upholding the, quote, rule of law. Our question is, what rule of law is he talking about? Is he talking about a rule that says it's okay for a racist prosecutor to use race in jury selection? Is he talking about a rule that says it's okay for a prosecutor to be dishonest? Is he talking about a rule that says that our criminal justice system cannot correct a grave error? Is he talking about a rule that says it's okay to inflict cruel and unusual punishment? Is he talking about a rule that says that a district attorney general is not to do justice, but rather he is to pursue a victory at any cost? Those are not our rules of law. Interestingly, nowhere does the AG mention justice. Nowhere does the AG mention the need for trials to be fair. Nowhere does the AG mention equal protection under the law or due process. Nowhere does he mention the Eighth Amendment ban on cruel and unusual punishment. Justice, equal protection, due process, fair trials, the Eighth Amendment ban on cruel and unusual punishment, those are the rules we support. They embody what we understand to be the rule of law. So we have a fundamental disagreement with the Attorney General about how we see the law. Finally, a couple of days ago, my grandson Blake had a conversation with my wife Cindy, who's over there. And he was curious, what's going on? And Cindy said, well, the AG is trying to blow up an agreement. And he said, why? He's an old man. What's the point? Abu-Ali is 69 years old. He's had health problems. The question before all of us is not whether, the legal question is whether the AG can do what he's doing. That's the question that is going to be presented to the court. But the real question is whether this is what the AG should be doing. That's the question. The AG, the District Attorney General, and the courts, their primary duty is to do justice. But what the AG is advocating for is to prioritize proceduralism over justice. Thank you.
Before I open it up for questions, I would be remiss if I did not tell you all that we do have a website, www.justicefораbu, that's ABU.org. We will continue to update that website with updates of what's going on in the case and other information as it becomes available to us. And before you leave today, please feel free to pick up one of these handouts. We have a summary of the case. We have the pretrial memorandum, which sets forth the facts that we discussed here today, so that you can see we're not just making stuff up. and some other information. Dr. Hildreth's prepared remarks are all there. So we encourage you to pick that up. There's also a contact list.